Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Thank you so much for tuning into my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my top 10 favorite fragrances for the winter of 2013 to 2014, and this is going to be the niche edition. I have not done the designer version yet. You can expect that to be released in the coming weeks, but for right now this is the niche version, so these are all niche fragrances. Now I just want to put it out there that I do live in New Jersey, so New Jersey has a tendency of getting really cold in the winter. So as opposed to other climates where it's still relatively warm in the winter season, over here it can get as low as 20 to 30 degrees, and it has been. Sometimes with a wind chill and a real field temperature, it can go down to the 10s, and it gets really cold. So in full disclosure, a lot of the fragrances that were in my fall list, if you haven't seen that, I'm going to leave a link for that here. A lot of those fragrances are also going to be worn by me in the winter. Now this is going to be an entirely new set of fragrances, but I just want to throw that out there in full disclosure. I will still be wearing some of my fall fragrances, so those are still quite appropriate for the winter if you live in a climate condition similar to mine. I do apologize, I am a little stuffy today, I'm a little sick. Coming down with a bit of a cold, so I do want to apologize for that. Also, I also want to say that this is a list that I compiled. This is not a list that I found online or in a magazine or anything like that. And also, these are fragrances that are available to me. I have smelled a lot of fragrances, a lot that I think would make the top 10 in my list. Unfortunately, I don't own them, and I don't have access to them, so for that reason they have not made my list. So these are only fragrances that I own and that are in my personal collection. So without further ado, these are my top 10 favorite fragrances for the winter of 2013 into 2014. The 10 fragrances that I think I'm going to be wearing a lot in the coming months. So first up, let's start off with number 10. I don't have any honorable mentions, excuse me. Number 10 on my list is a fragrance that I guess it used to be darling in the community. It used to be talked about and raved and hyped, and now it seems like it's kind of been falling by the wayside. And I think that it's an excellent fragrance in terms of its artistic representation, but when it comes down to practical wearability, I think a lot of people have a tendency of shying away from it, just because it has been compared to an old man's fragrance. Perhaps it's a little too dry or too spicy for some, but this fragrance from the house of Tower Perfumes is called L'air du Désert Marocain. So the perfumer for this is Andy Tower, a pretty recent fragrance, I think. It can be a little bit too dry, and as the name implies, the air of the Moroccan desert, which would be the English translation, it is dry. It's somewhat ambery. There's more ambergris in here, though, I think, giving it that staticky undertone. But again, some people have noted that they would imagine somebody of an older age wearing this fragrance, and I do have to kind of jump on the bandwagon and say that I do agree with that. But again, in terms of its artistic representation, it's still one of my favorite fragrances, but because I can't wear it all that often, or I get a little self-conscious when I wear it in public, I am going to put it at number 10 on my list, but definitely one of my favorites, so definitely worth checking out. L'air du Désert Marocain by Tower Perfumes. Number 9 on my list is a fragrance that I have been purposely trying not to wear lately, and I'm going to explain that in a little bit, but this is really, it is a beautiful fragrance. I completely adore this nose. I got a chance to meet him a couple months ago at Oswald here in New York City, and he was gracious enough to sign my bottle for me. And this is a fragrance that was dubbed by another YouTube fragrance reviewer by the name of Lupe. His YouTube channel is The Lupe Experience. He said this fragrance not only smells sexy, it smells like sex. And I would have to agree with that. This one is from the house of Maison Francis Colognes, and it's called Absolu pour le Soir. And what you get from this fragrance is, and I do apologize for my bottle, he personalized it for me. I was fortunate enough to meet him. What this fragrance smells like, it's an abundance of this honeycomb, really waxy, resinous, thick, viscous honey note that really introduces the composition. You have a lot of resins and spices underneath, and it has this tiny animalic tinge, but it's not like in a civet kind of way. It doesn't smell fecal or like urine or anything like that. It's actually quite a sexy fragrance, and I think the honey really does that to this composition. Beautiful fragrance. Number 9 on my list, Absolu pour le Soir from the house of Maison Francis Colognes. So number 8 on my list is a fragrance that I think is a little too pricey, much pricier than it should be, I think. I bought this fragrance following all the hype, and when I smelled this fragrance for the first time, before it was available, I knew that I had to have it in my collection, but I still do think it's a little bit too pricey, and I still, just like L'air du Désert Marocain, I still get kind of iffy about wearing it in public, hence the reason why it's, you know, number 8 on this list as opposed to being in the top 5. This is from the house of Le Labo, and it's called Poivre 23. And what you get from this fragrance is this overabundance of pepper in the opening. It actually comes across quite strongly. If you're not a fan of pepper, you're gonna hate this fragrance. But then it dries down to this really sweet, somewhat medicinal dry down with, I believe, styrax benzoin. It kind of gives off this medicinal feel, but it has this vanillic overtone to it too, so it's sweet. It's definitely a very intriguing scent. It's a very unique scent too. I know I would compare it to another one from the house of Xerjoff, part of the Join the Club collection. It's called Ivory Root. I think they share some similarities in the introduction. This one in the dry down, it does have like that kind of thick, resinous, sappy benzoin dry down that I really do love. So great fragrance, I think. Number 8 on my list from the house of Le Labo. It's called Poivre 23. Number 7 on my list is a fragrance that in my starting lineup I said was my night out scent, and I just think it has this playful nature about it that really qualifies it or makes it an excellent contender for a night out scent. It's this beautiful combination of plum and oud with a vanillic undertone. I believe a little bit of tonka bean in there too. Really sweetens things up. My favorite from the house, this is from the house of Bond number 9, and it's called Andy Warhol. Now, this does get compared just a little bit to a fragrance from Tom Ford called Plum Japonaise, which is one of the newer private blend fragrances. I do agree with the comparison. I think that this fragrance is a little bit sweeter, not incensey like Plum Japonaise is, and overall, I think this has much more of a playful vibe to it. Plum Japonaise, I think, is a little bit more sophisticated. This is a little more playful, and also it does get, I do want to warn you, just get a little synthetic in the dry down, but still, totally don't mind. Love this fragrance from the house of Bond number 9. It's called Andy Warhol. This is the Face edition. I believe now it's discontinued. So 10, 9, 8, 7. Number 6 on my list is a newer acquisition of mine, and it's quickly climbing up the list of favorite fragrances in my collection. And I was totally blown away the moment that I smelled this fragrance. If there's one fragrance in this entire list that reminds me of the winter season the most, it's this fragrance. And I was totally surprised. I recently had a chance to sample the entire line, courtesy of Creed Frags 34, Ryan. Thank you so much, Ryan. He sent me a sample pack of the entire line, and just one after another. Even the floral, more feminine fragrances work really well to my liking, so I was quite surprised by the offerings. And this is from a house called Imaginary Authors. This is Josh Meyer's newest release, and it's called Cape Heartache. So with this fragrance, what you get is this pine resin, and it really does quite remind you of like a Christmas tree. So it's pine resin, but it has this strawberry opening. It's really fruity, really jammy. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Fields of Rubus by Kerosene, except that one is raspberry. With this one, you get the strawberry opening, but it's so sweet, and I think that the vanilla leaf that's used in this fragrance might have a little bit to do with that. Not too familiar with the other notes. I know some of them are imaginary, like the Old Growth and the Mountain Fog, but it does have this kind of coniferous feel to it. Really interesting how they interplay these imaginary notes into the composition. Really kind of gives you or paints or limbs this mental image of what that scene would smell like, what it should look like based off this smell. Beautiful fragrance. If you've ever smelled pine trees, or if you ever grab the Christmas tree and you get a little bit of that sappy resin on your hand, that's exactly what this smells like, with the really sweet, juicy strawberry overtone. Just wow, great fragrance. Gets compared a lot to one from the house of Parfumum Roma called Arso. So if you've tried that, this one is very similar. I think Arso is a little smokier though. This one, really nice fragrance. So from the house of Imaginary Authors, it's called Cape Heartache. So number 5 on my list is a Tom Ford private blend, and I was in a toss-up. I think Noir de Noir works excellently this season, as does Tobacco Vanille, and I have recently had a chance to try Phaeton's Tabac Rouge, and I agree that it's a little bit sweeter, and if I owned that bottle, I would actually have put that on this list too. But this private blend, I kind of save for the winter season just because the performance on my skin is excellent. And this one, just to go ahead and mention what it is, from the house of Tom Ford private blend, this is called Tuscan Leather. Now, of course, what you get from this is this really raw, kind of animalic leather note. I know a lot of other people have compared it to the smell of cocaine. Personally, I've never tried or smelled cocaine, so I can't validate that, but it's been recently mentioned in a Drake song. I believe even in Jay-Z's Tom Ford song, he made a reference to it. I don't know how accurate that is, but in any case, yes, this fragrance does have that leather opening, and then it also has this berry note that accompanies it. And while I think the leather note on its own is not entirely wearable or versatile, that berry note really adds or increases the versatility of this fragrance. Just a really really sophisticated fragrance, I think, and really upper class smelling. One of my favorites. And I lately have been wearing it and layering it with Creed's Aventus. Gentleman's Corner Rizzo, thank you for that tip. Yeah, I think it just works really, really well with Aventus by Creed. So number 5 on my list from the house of Tom Ford, a private blend, Tuscan leather, really awesome smelling fragrance. So number 4 on my list is a fragrance that I've had now for a few months, and it's up here on this list just because it's very different, but again, it's very wearable. It's a very cozy fragrance. I think it could also work really well in the fall, but just because the performance is so beastly on this one, I ended up putting it in the winter list. This is from the house of Montal, and it's the only Montal fragrance on this list, and this is called Intense Cafe. Now, Intense Cafe is just a beautiful fragrance. Think coffee, this really authentic coffee opening, and then you're also going to get a bunch of rose in the opening to accompany it. Some other floral notes. I think the rose note is the most dominant, then it dries down into this mix of vanilla and labdanum and different resins that kind of make up this amber accord. Just a beautiful, beautiful fragrance. Very inviting and alluring. And for me, the coffee note lasts on my skin for a very, very long time. I know some people say they get it for like a minute or 2 minutes or 10 seconds or however long. For me, it's like hours. Hours I smell it, and I smell that like coffee bean opening, beautiful fragrance. Definitely number 4 on my list from the house of Montal, Intense Cafe. Intense it is. So yeah, number 3 on my list is a fragrance that I knew was going to make this list before I even set out to compile it, just because I think this is the only season that this fragrance is appropriate in, because of the performance, because of the compositional nature, because of the ingredients, everything. And with this fragrance, I am pretty self-conscious when I wear it in public. So I tend to just do 1 or 2 sprays, and this isn't extrait de parfum, so I wouldn't dare do any more than that. I think this one will really turn some people off. This is from the house of Nasamato, and it's called Black Afghano. Now, this is definitely one of my favorite Nasamato fragrances, and what you get from this is kind of like a oud. It has a hash note in it, not really present, I think. Very difficult to review, as a matter of fact. Hence the reason why I have not reviewed it yet. But kind of like a woodsy coffee, hash, oud, perhaps even tobacco thrown into the mix too. Really unique, different, and mysterious fragrance. One of the most unique fragrances in my collection, although some others like Queer by Carno Barcelona and a few other fragrances have surfaced since then that do kind of smell like this one. But again, I would consider this the originator. Really different, beautiful composition by Alessandro Gottieri, making it number 3 on my list, Black Afghano from the house of Nasamato. Number 2 on my list is a fragrance that I have not been wearing a lot, I'm going to confess to that, but lately I will plan on wearing it a lot just because I think it's so appropriate for the season. It's a really sweet caramel fragrance with oud and vanilla and some other resins in there, with a small, tiny animalic pinch in the background, but it starts to fade very, very quickly on into the composition. Beautiful fragrance from the house of Xerjoff. This is part of the Oud Stars collection, and it's called Mamluk. So again, like I said, beautiful caramel opening, really sweet, has that vanilla touch to it as well. Very gourmand, very gourmandish. It's not overly sweet, I think, but it's definitely noticeable. The sweetness is definitely present, definitely evident, it's there. And then it has oud and this tiny animalic pinch. I believe it may be jasmine, but it starts to fade very early on. And then as it settles into the skin, it just becomes so sweet, so beautiful, so inviting. Excellent fragrance. Number 2 on my list. I'm going to be wearing it a lot this winter, all the while trying to preserve whatever I have left over in the bottle. So number 2 from the Oud Stars collection by Xerjoff. It's called Mamluk. So number 1 on my list is a fragrance that's going to make me sound like a bit of a hypocrite just because I put L'air du Désert Marocain number 10 on my list, and I said that it made number 10 because it's not very wearable. Well, my number one is probably one of the most unwearable fragrances in my entire collection, but winter is the only season that I actually wear it with a little bit of comfort, and that's not in the opening as it starts to dry down. And the reason why I chose to make this fragrance number one on my list is because the uniqueness and the smell itself to me is such an enjoyable smell, and I just become so drawn by it and so captivated by it. I know some people are completely put off by it, some people are disgusted by it. For me, I just love the smell. It's one of my favorite smelling fragrances, and the smell overrides every other aspect of this fragrance. It overrides the versatility, it overrides the wearability, the occasions, everything. But I just love the smell so much that for that reason I look forward to wearing this fragrance the most this winter. Number one on my list from the house of Amouage. This is called Interlude Man. Now again, please take my caution. This is a very unwearable fragrance, and the reason why I say that is because in the opening you're going to get that smoky, incensey, almost as if it were birch tar. Very smoky, culinary overtone. It's oregano, and it gives it this smoky touch to the composition. But once it dries down, the resins, the apopanax, it just creates this really, really heavenly dry down, and it's one of my favorite smells of all time. Definitely looking forward to wearing this fragrance a lot in the winter, but again, it's not a very versatile, it's not a very wearable fragrance, especially in the opening. As it starts to dry down, it becomes a little bit more appealing, a little bit more wearable, but I definitely do want to throw that out there. Definitely do not blind buy, always try, always sample before you buy, pending accessibility and whatnot. But definitely number one on my list from the house of Amouage is called Interlude Man. So there you have it. Thank you so much for watching. These are my top 10 favorite fragrances for the winter of 2013, going into 2014. So thank you so much for watching. If you have tried or own any of these fragrances, please let me know what you think by leaving a comment down below. Also, if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to try to get back to you as soon as possible. Send me a message, leave a comment down below. I'll try to get back to you as quickly as possible. So again, thank you so much for watching my videos and tuning into my channel. This has been Steven with another video from Red Essence. Take care.